Our bloodlines originated in the 1100s with the arrival of two ancient tribes from the west, the Shoshone in the north and the Utahs in the Utah Territory. The Fremont culture dominated what is now Utah, and we are their descendants. This important cultural diversity was introduced into Utah about 500 A.D., when a form of the agricultural basket maker culture appeared. Clearly identifiable remains of this culture are found throughout the territory from eastern Nevada to western Colorado, and from southern Utah to southern Idaho and Wyoming. Fremont roots go back 2,000 years, and by 1350 A.D., the Fremont culture was gone from the Great Basin and northern Colorado Plateau. In 1776, Franciscan priests Francisco Atanasio Dominguez and Silvestre Velez de Escalante traveled to find an overland route from Santa Fe, New Mexico, to their Roman Catholic mission in Monterey on the coast of modern-day Central California. They came north through country inhabited by Utah Indians, who called themselves Utahs, in western Colorado, and crossed the Green River into the Uinta River Valley Basin in what is now northeastern Utah, where they stayed for several weeks to rest and graze their horses. The Catholic fathers found more bands of Utahs. There they met the Uinta bands of Utah, who have lived in the Uinta River Valley Basin at the foot of the Uinta Mountains. Since the 1700s, the people had horses and traveled throughout the Utah Territory. The expedition traveled west across the Uinta Basin to the Timpanogos Mountains, located on the west side of the Salt Lake Valley, in what is now Heber City, down Provo Canyon, and into the Utah Lake area, where they came into contact with the Timpanogos Band of Utah Indians who lived at the mouth of the canyon entering the Salt Lake Valley, and what is now commonly called the Wasatch Front. They also met up with many other bands and family clans of Utah Indians, led by a headman or chief, who were scattered throughout the West's Great Basin. The journals kept by the fathers was the first written description of the Utah Indian lands and of the people residing throughout the West and in the Great Basin. Our oral story passed down through the family clan says that two ancient tribes traveled together from the west. They settled in the Great Basin, living and hunting together. After some time, there was a dispute between two leaders. One tribe stayed north as the Northern Shoshone, and the other tribe came south as the Utahs. Although the Indian tribes of Utah were at this period very numerous, the word Utahs was commonly applied to those south of the Great Salt Lake, and Shoshone, or snakes, to those north and west of the lake, especially in the valley of the Humboldt River. The Snakes and Utahs were both Shoshone tribes. Pierre Louis Vasquez and Jim Bridger established the first trading post on the Black Forks of the Green River in 1843 in what is now Fort Bridger, Wyoming, in Uinta County. They knew the native inhabitants and portions of their history. These men were early fur traders for the American Fur Company and had traded with the native for many years. From their knowledge, they had expressed that the Utahs say they had always been on the lands, as far back as they can remember. Horsemanship had been obtained by the Uinta Ats in northeastern Utah since the 1700s, through the development of trade routes with the Spanish. By the 1840s, the Utahs had an extensive herd of horses. Chief Wakara's horse pasture extended from the lands of the Pavant Band on the lower Sevier River to the crossing of the Green River, along the old Spanish Trail west of Grand Junction, Colorado. Chief Wakara and his band traveled from California to Mexico, trading goods, horses, and captured Indian children throughout the 1840s and 1850s. During one of his raiding campaigns to California, he stole hundreds of horses and drove them back to his homeland, what became known as the Utah Territory. He then sold those horses to settlers heading to Oregon and California, and traded some in Mexico. John C. Fremont explored the Uinta Basin and provided his reports to the United States government, Chief of the Corps of Topographical Engineers. On May 13, 1844, he wrote, "We traveled for several days in this direction, within the rim of the Great Basin, crossing little streams which bore to the left for Sevier Lake, and plainly seeing, by the changed aspect of the country, that we were entirely clear of the desert and approaching the regions which appertain to the system of the Rocky Mountains. We met in this traverse a few mounted Utah Indians in advance of their main body, watching the approach of the great caravan." On May 20th, 1844, he wrote, "We met a band of Utah Indians, headed by a well-known chief, who had obtained the American or English name Walker, by which he is quoted and well known. They were all mounted, armed with rifles, and used their rifles well. The chief had a fusee, which he had carried slung in addition to his rifle. They were journeying slowly towards the Spanish Trail to levy their usual tribute upon the great California caravan. They were robbers of a higher order than those of the desert. They conducted their depredations with form and under the color of trade, and toll for passing through their country. Instead of attacking and killing, they effect a purchase, taking the horses they like, and giving something nominal in return. The chief was quite civil to me. He was personally acquainted with his namesake, our guide, who made my name known to him. He knew of my expedition in 1842, and as tokens of friendship and proof that we had met, proposed an interchange of presents. We had no great store to choose out of, so he gave me a Mexican blanket, and I gave him a very fine one which I had obtained at Vancouver. In 1849, the United States government had acquired new lands under the Guadalupe-Hidalgo Treaty from Mexico. Their plan was to divide the vast land into separate territories. The Utah Territory was established in 1850 and named after the Utahs Indian Nation. There were many Utah bands in the territory, with their own chiefs and sub-chiefs. The bands of Utahs were the Uinta, Sapich, Comumbas, Yampapa, Pa-Utahs, Shibariches, Elk Mountain Utahs, Suvarits, Cosanats, Taos Utahs, Pavants, Timpanog's, Pequaquanarats, Tumpanuwach, Shivwits, and the Spanish Fork Utahs. They were fearless warriors and roamed throughout the Utah Territory. Deseret News, July 12, 1850. Indian Fight, July 1st. We received a long letter from John W. Jones, captain of the Oquawka, Illinois Company of Emigrants, giving the particulars of an Indian fight at Yellow Creek, about 11 miles west of Bear River, on the morning of the 27th of June. We have not room for the particulars, but the principal facts have since been corroborated by Mr. A. Williams of Utah, who says that the Utah chief, Walker, told him that he had burned 6 lodges of the Snakes 11 miles west of Bear River, killed 7 men and 4 squaws, and taken 5 prisoners and 40 horses in revenge for the Snakes having previously killed some of his Indians. While the captors were contending about the division, they killed all the horses, and the prisoners were for sale. Walker's statement is doubtless correct and agrees with Captain Jones, except in length and particulars. The Utahs were well established and known among the tribes of the Western Territories. They were powerful, feared, and were ruthless when trading. During the early 1850s, the northern Shoshones under Chief Washki had a falling out with Chief Wakara. He would not trade with them and killed any that trespassed on his lands without permission. Chief Washki enlisted the help of Brigham Young, governor and Indian agent, to establish trade with the chief. On August 6, 1852, the parties met in Salt Lake City, Utah, to discuss trading and peace among their people. Through much discussion, Chief Washki and Chief Wakara agreed to peace and future trading. Brigham Young reported the meeting in his report to the Commissioner of Indian Affairs in 1852. In 1851, Brigham Young, Latter-day Saints church leader, was appointed as the Utah Territorial Governor and Indian Agent. One of Brigham Young's first duties as Indian Agent was to establish Indian agencies. Brigham Young divided the territory into 3 agencies: the Parvan Agency, Uinta Agency, and the Parowan Agency. The Uinta Agency to include all of the Snakes or Shoshones within said territory, the Uinta and Yampa, and all other tribes south within said territory and east of the eastern rim of the Great Basin. Proclamation to all whom it may concern. Whereas the law of Congress entitled An Act to Establish a Territorial Government for Utah, approved September 9, 1850, devolves the duties of the Superintendent of Indian Affairs within said territory upon the Governor of said territory. And whereas there have been appointed by the United States government 1 Indian agent and 2 sub-agents for this territory, now therefore by virtue of said authority and to advance the purposes of the government for the benefit of the Indians, I do hereby order and direct that this territory be divided into 3 agencies as follows, to wit, the first, or Parvan Indian Agency, to include all within the limits of the territory, west of the Shoshone Nation and north of the south line of the Parvan Valley. The second, or Uinta Agency, to include all of the Snakes or Shoshones within said territory, the Uinta, Yampa, and all other tribes south within said territory and east of the eastern rim of the Great Basin. The third, or Parowan Agency, to include all the country lying west of the eastern rim of the Great Basin and south of the south line of the Parvan Valley to the western bounds of the territory. Henry R. Day and Stephen B. Rose, the sub-agents having arrived and being ready to enter upon the discharge of their respective duties, are hereby temporarily and until further directions assigned to their respective agencies as follow, to wit, Henry R. Day to the first, or Parvan Agency, and Stephen B. Rose to the second, or Uinta Agency, Brigham Young, Governor of Utah Territory and Superintendent of Indian Affairs. Great Salt Lake, July 21st, 1851. Once the Indian agencies had been established, the push to keep the Utahs on less land and roaming began. This did not set well with the nomadic bands who understood the land's life cycle. By staying in one place in large numbers for too long, depleted the animals, plants, and water. A resistance began among the bands, and any perceived insult or dispute required a retribution. Chief Walker Panakare Quirker, the white people called him Walker, was the head chief of the Utahs. In the early 1850s, his band traveled long distances trading in California and Mexico. He was a fearless leader and could be dangerous when provoked. However, he was friendly with the white settlers and brought them news and trade goods. Extracts of a letter from J. D. Lee Parowan, Iron County, March 13, 1852. Dr. Willard Richards, dear brother, Walker, the Utah chief, on his return from the Mocknick, Navajos, and Welsh Indians, stopped with us for 2 days. From him we had an interesting account of those tribes and more especially of the country. He says that they live in houses and farm, raise sheep, and manufacture clothes. Their women tie up their hair like ours, and some of them have light hair and blue eyes. He says they speak the Spanish language and have a knowledge of us from Walker and want us to come and trade with them and see their country. 2 of the P-days killed an ox of Brother S. Johnson. Some 8 or 10 men pursued them. 4 of the number took them prisoners, brought them near the settlements. When they tried to make their escape, one of them was killed and the other wounded. The natives were much offended and showed signs of hostility. Some sheep and horses were taken. 1 horse was mortally wounded. The sheep were killed. They also shot at the herdsmen. At their conduct, Walker appeared displeased, took their chief's pony by force, and would have killed Chief Quanara had not Brother J. L. Smith and myself prevented them. After the 2 chiefs took a knockdown, Walker preached to them and told them of their meanness and said he would tell the big captain, Governor Young, of their conduct. Walker and his brave were so enraged that they shot the pony that they had taken for revenge. We kept them apart and privately slipped old Quanara, the Pieta chief, away. This we did not believing him guilty. Walker left us this morning with friendly feelings. He is intending to visit your valley and city and says he will return again at harvest to go with a company to the Welsh Indians. This little fracas, I verily believe, will result in good for us. We also learned from Walker that Uncle Sam had a fort and troops stationed on the Colorado River, and that they had made a treaty with the Navajos. Chief Walcara, in an interview with interpreter M.S. Martinez, 1853, Walcara said that he had always been opposed to the whites settling on the Indian lands, the portion which he claims, and on which his band resides, and on which they have resided since his childhood, and his parents before him. The Mormons, when they first commenced the settlement of Salt Lake Valley, was friendly, and promised them many comforts, and lasting friendship. That they continued friendly for a short time, until they became strong in numbers. Then their conduct and treatment towards the Indians changed. They were not only treated unkindly, but many were much abused, and this course has been pursued up to the present. Sometimes they have been treated with much severity. They have been driven by this population from place to place. Settlements have been made on all their hunting grounds in the valleys, and the graves of their fathers have been torn up by the whites. A. Peterson describes his point of view of the time. Latter-day Saints considered themselves in a state of open warfare. They built scores of forts and deserted dozens of settlements, while hundreds of Mormon militia chased their elusive adversaries through the wilderness with little success. Requests for federal troops went unheeded for 8 years. Unable to distinguish differences between tribesmen, frustrated Mormons indiscriminately killed Indians, including women and children. On July 17, 1853, there was a dispute while trading goods at a white settlement near Springville, Utah. The Indians believed they were being cheated. A white settler killed one of the Indians during a struggle. This incident angered the Utahs, and Chief Walker, Ponacare Quirker, demanded one of their lives for the death of his Indian relative. The settlers refused. Chiefs Arapeen and Wanship were also present and opposed any compromise. On the early morning of October 26, 1853, Captain John W. Gunnison of the Corps of Topographical Engineers and a party of 7 were camped on the Lower Sevier River in Pavant Territory. All were killed as retaliation for Indian deaths. Other skirmishes occurred. Cattle and horses were stolen, and people on both sides were killed. Chief Walker, Ponacare Quirker, and his band knew the canyon country well and outmaneuvered the Mormon militia and were never caught. In the spring of 1854, Utah leaders, Chief Ammon and Chief Nuyuwat Noatmigo, said they were ready to lay down their arms and offered terms for peace. Chief Walker Ponacare Quirker, who had since returned from Navajo country, petitioned Brigham Young for peace and met for negotiations at Chicken Creek in Juab County, Utah. Their meeting ended the conflict. But it did not solve the underlying issue that the Mormons were trespassing on Utah's lands and were taking everything that was needed for them to survive. In February of 1856, a sub-chief named Tintic and his small band stole cattle and horses throughout the Cedar Valley west of Utah Lake. These skirmishes became known as the Tintic War. The Utahs were starving. There was a drought, and Tintic and his followers began taking cattle from the settlers. His brother-in-law, Chief Nuyuwat Noat Migo, did not support his raids and left Tintic to make his own way. There were many skirmishes and deaths on both sides. Without the support from the other Utah bands, the Tintic War ended without a peace treaty. Tintic lost his status as sub-chief and eventually retreated to the Uinta Valley by late 1856. The Deseret News, October 29th, 1856. Kanosh and Tintic. Brother D.B. Huntington informs us that Kanosh, the Corn Creek chief, has a good house and household furniture, outbuildings, horses, cattle, wagons, 70 bushels of wheat thrashed in stores, and plenty of vegetables, with the exception of potatoes, which the worms destroyed. Kanosh's rapid advancement in the scale of civilization is due, in addition to his own inherent energy, intelligence, and anxiety to improve, to the specific policy so wisely advocated by the Honorable G.W. Manypenny, Commissioner of Indian Affairs, and so ably counseled and carried out by His Excellency Brigham Young, Governor and ex officio Superintendent. And it proves the efficacy of the patience and good example exercised by the whites, accompanied with timely encouragement, good usage, and reasonable assistance. Tintic is poor and alone, but still disaffected and threatening, and has gone to the Uinta Valley. Kind treatment seems to be wasted upon his savage disposition, and he is probably too old and hardened to be induced to lay aside his bloodthirsty feelings. By 1865, the tensions between the Mormons and the Utahs had been mounting for years. On April 9, 1865, in Manti, Utah, a disagreement arose over cattle that had been killed by a Utah band to feed their starving people. A Mormon settler became angry and jerked a Utah off of his horse. This action insulted the Utah delegation. Chief Tenaciono Sandpitch's son, Nunch Antanga, gathered members from his band of Shibi riches and retaliated by stealing hundreds of cattle and killing 5 Mormons. There were many other skirmishes and lives lost on both sides. Through these actions, Nunch Antanga was declared a war chief. However, he did not have the support of all the Utahs or his uncle Chief Sowiet, who would not declare war with him. In 1867, Nunch Antanga made peace with the Mormons and came to the Uinta Valley Reservation, and a peace treaty was signed in 1868. His followers eventually went back to their bands or came to the reservation. Nunch Antanga died on September 26, 1870, near Richfield, Utah. The Deseret News, August 28, 1867. Black Hawk. We had the pleasure of meeting Superintendent Head on Wednesday evening, who had arrived from Uinta Reservation, where he had met and had a talk with the notorious Black Hawk, who came there with his family, unattended by his warriors. Black Hawk said he has 28 lodges under his sole control, and that he is assisted by 3 Elk Mountain chiefs, who have each 10 or 12 lodges with them. These Indians are scattered along the settlements from the north of San Pate County to the southern settlements, watching opportunities to make raids. He expressed a desire for peace, said he could control and would be answerable for his band, and believed he could get the others with him, as they all looked to him as the head chief. He would try and get them all together at some point, perhaps Uinta, to have a talk with Colonel Head, but it would take some time to do this, as they are so scattered. As an earnest of his sincerity, he stated that he had made a covenant, when he commenced to fight, that he would not have his hair cut, and he had talked strong of Tabby and Kanosh, who had theirs cut like white men, but now that he was going to have peace, he wished to have it cut and requested the superintendent to shorten his locks for him, which was done after finding that was anxious to have it so. The savage was saucy at the opening of their interview, but finally toned down and talked reasonable before they got through. The Deseret News, August the 26th, 1868 Indian Treaty, Colonel F. H. Head, Superintendent Indian Affairs, and Major Dimmick B. Huntington, Indian interpreter, returned to the city yesterday afternoon from Strawberry Valley, Uinta, where a big talk had been held on Wednesday with the Indians, and a treaty concluded with those who have been continuing depredatory visits to our settlements in San Pete. Black Hawk was present, but it is claimed that he has faithfully observed the treaty made last year and has not been engaged in any raid on the whites since. Those with whom the talk was principally held and who signed the treaty were Aug Avor Tam Ritz, and Saw Point, chiefs of Ashibaricha Indians. The first named is the principal chief and is young and feminine looking. The second has been the prime mover in several of the raids made on our settlements and in the murders of whites, which have been before time accredited to Black Hawk. He was the chief who was riding the white horse in one of the battles with the Indians, who was severely wounded and was supposed to be Black Hawk. At the time, it was reported that Black Hawk was killed. He was of the party who murdered Major Vance and Sergeant Houts, and was at other places where whites were killed. The talk with these chiefs was a lengthy one, occupying nearly all day, and while it was progressing, the lodge was surrounded by warriors and squaws waiting for the result. Finally, they concluded to bury the hatchet and be at peace with the whites, and a treaty was concluded, which Major Huntington believes they will observe. But our brethren in the settlements who are exposed to their incursions will do well to remember that eternal vigilance is the price of safety, and keep themselves ever ready to guard their lives, their families, and property from Indian attacks. After the Tintic War ended in 1856, Indian agent Garland Hurt established 3 Indian farms, the Spanish Fork, the Corn Creek, and the San Pete, to teach the Utahs agriculture and an attempt to civilize them. He requested money and farm implements for these farms, but very little was given to the endeavor. These farms were referred to as reservations. However, they were not established by the United States government or approved by Congress. The Spanish Fork Indian Farm was established in 1856 for the Spanish Fork Utahs. It was located at the mouth of the Spanish Fork River. This area had been the permanent home of Chief Petit Neat and his band. The Corn Creek Indian Farm was established in 1855 for the Pavant Utahs on Corn Creek in Millard, Utah. It was located just downstream from the Pavant village of Chief Kanash. The San Pete Indian Farm was established in 1856 for the San Pitch Utahs under Chief Arapeen. It was located on 12 Mile Creek in San Pete County, Utah. The farm projects failed miserably, and all were eventually abandoned. The Mountaineer, Salt Lake City, Utah, May 12, 1860. Indian News, Antero Vi Ahu, a Yampa Ute, and Tabby, son of old Uinta, have been in this city a few days. They say that about in 2 moons there is going to be a great treaty between the Ute and Snake nations. To complete the treaty, the Utes are to meet with Washkey and his tribe at Yellow Creek, near the place where Walker and the Snakes fought a number of years ago. Antero says that 5 white men who were engaged in prospecting for gold have been killed the past winter by the Tau Utes. A large encampment of the Yampa Utes is just below the government camp at Camp Floyd and on the same creek. Soviet and band are encamped at the mouth of Spanish Fork Canyon. The tensions between the Utahs and the white settlers continued. The Utahs became more desperate for food and lands for their families. The government solution to keep them safe was to establish an Indian reservation in the territory for the Utahs. Brigham Young spoke with Chief Antero Vallejo, chief of the Yampapa and Taos Utahs. He suggested lands in the northeastern portion of the territory where there were no white settlers. Chief Antero described the area and agreed to take his people to the reservation if it was in the Uinta Basin. On October 3, 1861, President Abraham Lincoln established the Uinta Valley Reservation by an executive order for the bands of Utahs. Congress ratified the order on May 5, 1864. The Uinta Valley Reservation included all lands from mountaintop to mountaintop within the Utah Territory. The reservation was created prior to Colorado becoming a state, and the United States government had no other ratified treaties with the Utahs. In the 1862 Commissioner of Indian Affairs report, Indian agent T.W. Hatch reported that within his agency proper there were 5 different tribes of Indians: Utahs, Shoshones, Gauchi Utes, Parvans, and Paiutes, and each is divided into several bands, with chiefs, besides several small bands, with sub-chiefs. The Utahs are divided into 6 bands, of which Soviet, White-Eye, Tabby, Anthro, Joe, and Kaibe are their chiefs. Kaibe's band is the only one that makes their permanent residence at this reservation, who are the remains of the 2 once powerful bands of Walker and P.T. Neat. During this time, the Utahs were misidentified by the Latter-day Saints, who started calling all Indians Utes. The Castilian Spanish word Ute was commonly used by the early Spanish explorers. Its meaning is an unknown Indian or tribe. A story has been passed down that during the late 1860s, Mexican traders revitalized the word, and the Latter-day Saints heard it and began using it. not knowing its origins or meaning. This misuse eventually carried over to the writings of the Indian agents, Indian commissioners, and general population. Today, the word is still misused. Many of our people knew that in order to survive, the family clans would need to leave their homelands and go to the Uinta Valley Reservation. Chief Tabby Tuquana, along with his 4 wives, Unka Toi Tabby, Ann Aro Uats Periet Tabby, Piedze Tabby, and Nettie West, and their many children, led the bands to the Uinta Valley Reservation by 1867. The Spanish Fork Utahs and the Sand Pitch Utahs moved between 1861 and 1867. Most of the Pavants had moved between 1866 and 1870. Only about 100 remained at their new settlement at the Springs near Corn Creek. In the 1865 Commissioner of Indian Affairs report, Superintendent O.H. Irish reported that the Utahs were composed of several bands, the most important being known as the Timpanoggs, Uintas, Pavants, and Sand Pitches. The first, controlled by Chief Ankar Tewits, ranged through Utah Valley and the mountains adjoining the valley on the east, and number about 300. The second, the Uintas, the principal band of the Utahs, are under the immediate control of Chief Soy Set and Sub-Chiefs Tabby and Toquo Ne, and range through Uinta Valley and the Green River country and number about 3,000. Third, the Pavants are controlled by Con Osh and several small sub-chiefs. They range through Pavant and Sevier Valley and west to the White Mountains. The Sand Pitches, numbering about 500, are controlled by Sowak Sioux Bet and range through the Sand Pitch Valley and Creek and on the Sevier River. In 1865, the white settlers continued to trespass on reservation lands, violating the 1861 executive order boundaries and squatting on Utah lands. The problem was so prolific that the Indian Affairs Superintendent, O.H. Irish, had the following presidential order printed throughout the territorial newspapers telling the white settlers to leave the Uinta Valley Reservation. Daily Union Vedette, January 28, 1865. Superintendency of Indian Affairs notice is hereby given that under an order of the President of the United States, dated October 3, 1861, that the entire portion of the valley of the Uinta River within Utah Territory, extending on both sides of said river to the crest of the first range of contiguous mountains on each side, was directed to be set apart as an Indian reservation. That by the provisions of an act of Congress, approved May 5, 1864, the Uinta Valley Reservation is set apart for the permanent settlement and exclusive occupation of such of the different tribes of Indians of Utah Territory as may be induced to inhabit the same. Therefore, notice is hereby given under instructions of the Department of the Interior, transmitted to me through the Commissioner of Indian Affairs, that all white settlers must forthwith remove from the Uinta Reservation, and that, on the opening of spring, all persons found therein unlawfully, that is, without a license to trade, a passport, or permission of the proper Indian authorities, will be removed, and the laws of the United States applicable to Indian reservations will be enforced. O.H. Irish, Superintendent Indian Affairs. On February 23, 1865, Congress approved an act to extinguish the Indian title to lands in the territory of Utah. Commissioner William P. Dole instructed Superintendent O.H. Irish to immediately make plans to treat with the Utahs. I have further to suggest that, inasmuch as it has not been the policy of government to acknowledge the full title of these Indians to the lands claimed by them, the treaties should be so framed that the Indians shall relinquish the right of occupancy of the lands included within defined boundaries, and agree to remove to and occupy the lands reserved for their use. On June 6, 1865, Superintendent O.H. Irish and his party met with the invited tribal chiefs for preliminary talks and reading of the treaty. The preamble stated, "Articles of Agreement and Convention made and concluded at Spanish Fork Indian Farm, in the territory of Utah, this 8th day of June, 1865, by O.H. Irish, Superintendent of Indian Affairs, for Said Territory Comarsk, on the part of the U.S. and the undersigned chiefs, on behalf of said Indians, and duly authorized by them. At a council of the Utah Indians, held at Spanish Fork Indian Reservation, commencing on the 7th of June, 1865, at so which the said Indians were represented by the following chiefs: So-a-et, Kanosh, Tabby, Toquone, So-ok-su-bet, Ankar-tuits, Kibitz, Am-oosh, Ankarenkeg, Namp-piades, Pamsuk, Peenup, Ea-gand, Nari-ent, Quo-o-gand, San-pitch. The treaty would require the Indians to cede all of their lands in the Salt Lake and Utah valleys on the Wasatch Front and the Ashley Valley on the Uinta Valley Reservation. The Indians did not want to give up their lands, and the chiefs voiced their opinions. If the talk is for us to trade the land in order to get the presents, I do not want any blankets or any clothing. I would rather go without than to give up my title to the land I occupy. Chief Sandpitch: The hearts of the Indians are full. They want to think. Wait until tomorrow. Let us go back to our lodges and talk and smoke over what has been said today. The Indians are not ready now to give up the land. They never thought of such a thing. Chief Tabby Toquana. On the 11th of March, 1869, Senator Harlan reported to the Senate. The result was the adoption of a resolution that the Senate does not advise and consent to the ratification of said treaties. The resolution was forwarded to the President, only to be returned to the Commissioner's office and buried in the unratified treaty files now located in the National Archives. Through our genealogy research, we are able to trace our Native American lineage back to the early 1700s, beginning with Chief Munch and his wife Bee, and Chief Munch Fuchawana and his wife Bahai Chief Fuchawana. Their sons, Chief Turunianchi and Chief Fuchawana, were powerful leaders, and so began our family lineage. During the mid-1800s, the Utah bands were led by a strong family of brothers descended from Chief Old Uinta Munch, who had 4 wives: sister of Chief Fuchawana, Wadzepeadze, Narmepeadze, and Tisham-I, always pretty, the daughter of Chief Fuchawana. His sons were chiefs over many of the bands: Grospeen, Tabby Tequana, Wakar Panakari Quirker, Signeroch Arapeen, Ammon, and Sandpitch. There were many other chiefs and sub-chiefs in our history, and our people are direct descendants of these family clans. Chief Munch was born and passed in the Utah Valley. He was chief of the Timpanogos Utahs that roamed the area surrounding Utah Lake. He is considered an ancient one amongst our people. His son was Chief Turuni Anchi. Chief Munch Fuchawana was born and passed in the Uinta Basin. He was chief of the ancient band of Uinta Utahs. He is considered an ancient, and his people were among those Utahs who were documented in the early Spanish explorer journals. Chief Fuchawana was born in the Uinta Basin and is buried near Spirit Lake in the Uinta Mountains, Utah. He is the son of Chief Munch Fuchawana and became chief of the Uinta Utahs when his father passed. Chief Turuni Anchi was born and passed in the Utah Valley. He is the son of Chief Munch and became the principal chief of the Timpanogos Band of Utahs after his father passed. His band roamed the area surrounding Utah Lake. The Timpanogos were first discovered in what became known as the Utah Territory by Spanish explorers Juan Rivera in 1765, and later by Dominguez and Escalante in 1776. Old Uinta Munch was born in the Utah Valley and passed near Spanish Fork, Utah. He is the son of Chief Turuni Anchi. He married Tisham Always Pretty, whose father was Chief Fuchawana of the Uinta Utahs. He became head chief of the Utahs Nation. His bands roamed throughout what became known as the Utah Territory. Chief San Pitch, the elder, was born in present-day Green River, Utah, and passed in the Uinta Mountains, Utah. He was the son of Chief Turuni Anchi and became the principal chief of the Yampahapa Utahs. His band roamed in and around present-day western Colorado. Chief San Pitch, the elder, was known to keep the peace among the bands and with other tribes. Chief Old Tenaciono San Pitch was born in the Utah Valley and passed in the Thistle Valley, Utah. He was the son of Chief Turuni Anchi and the brother to Chief San Pitch, the elder. He became the principal chief of the Sapich Utahs and was married to Tanarowich. Our family stories say he talked with Chief Wahker Panakarik Quirker about ending the Walker War and was behind the meeting at Chicken Creek with Brigham Young to talk peace. Chief Old San Pitch was described as aged and infirm, and whose eyes were dim and whose hand trembled as he recalled grievances against the whites, particularly the Americans, responsible for killing his wife and son. This elderly leader may have passed not long after this meeting, for his name fades from surviving records covering that time. Chief Pitet Neat was born in the Utah Valley and passed in Cedar Valley, Utah. He was the son of Chief Turuni Anchi and the brother to Chief San Pitch, the elder, and Chief Old Tenaciono San Pitch. He became chief of the Timpanogos Utahs after his father passed. Deseret News, January 1st, 1862. Death of Petit Neat. The well-known Utah chief, Petit Neat, as reported, died at or near Fort Crittenden, Cedar Valley, on or about 23rd. No horses were killed on the occasion, as is generally the case when an Indian of distinction dies, but a novel and brutal ceremony by his express order was instituted instead, and that was the killing of his wife, who was dispatched by beating out her brains with an axe, a squaw being the executioner. The chief was buried after the manner of Indian sepulture in the mountains adjacent, and his murdered wife in the valley beneath. Chief Kaib Mountain was born in Spanish Fork, Utah, and passed at the White Rocks Indian Village on the Uinta Valley Reservation, Utah. He was the son of Chief Old Tenaciono San Pitch and became chief of the Saw Peach, and the last remaining survivors of the Timpanogh Utahs in 1866. He moved his bands to the reservation shortly after. Chief Kaib Mountain was one of the signers on the unratified Spanish Fork Treaty in 1865. Chief Unduyuk George Washington Mountain was born in the Utah Valley and passed at the White Rocks Indian Village on the Uinta Valley Reservation, Utah. He was the son of Chief Kaib Mountain and a sub-chief of the Spanish Fork Utahs. After moving to the Uinta Valley Reservation, he became a sub-chief under Chief Tabby Tuquana after his father passed. Chief Opie Carey Featherstick in the Head One Roads was born in the Utah Valley and passed at the White Rocks Indian Village on the Uinta Valley Reservation, Utah. He was the son of Chief Petet Neat. He was said to be more volatile and would fight for his people. Opie Carey Featherstick in the Head One Roads became chief of the Pequaquanarats Utahs. His band roamed the Wasatch Valley in the Utah Territory. Chief Soviet was born in the Uinta Mountains and passed at the White Rocks Indian Village on the Uinta Valley Reservation, Utah. He was the son of Chief Turunianchi and the brother to Chief San Pitch, the elder Chief Old Tenaciono San Pitch, Chief Petet Neat, and Chief Old Uinta Munch. He became chief of the Uinta Ats after his brother Chief Old Uinta Munch passed in 1843 and head chief over all the Utahs after the bands began coming to the Uinta Valley Reservation beginning in 1861. He was known as a great speaker, a wise leader of his people, and was respected by all. Chief Antero Vallejo was born in the Utah Territory and passed at the White Rocks Indian Village on the Uinta Valley Reservation, Utah. He was chief of the Yampapa and Taos Utahs. His people roamed in present-day western Colorado and the Uinta Basin. When he was young, he was a fierce war chief. As he grew older, he was known as a great leader and a proponent for peace. He made several trips to Washington, D.C. to negotiate for our people. It has been passed down that when the Utahs began coming to the Uinta Valley Reservation, the Uinta Ats recognized Chief Soviet as their chief, and the Yampapa and Taos Utahs recognized Antero. After Chief Soviet passed in 1869, all the bands recognized a common allegiance to Chief Tabby Tuquana. Over time, the family clans were able to come together as one tribe called the Uinta Band of Utahs. Chief Wakara Panakare Quirker was born in the Utah Valley and passed at Meadow Creek in the Utah Valley. He was the son of Chief Old Uinta Munch and Tisham I Always Pretty, and head chief of the Utah's nation when the Latter-day Saints arrived in 1847. He was known to be ruthless when trading and would gather horses and sell them on his excursions to Mexico and California. He was an exceptional leader and roamed all over the Utah Territory to California. He spoke several native languages, Spanish, and his English was good enough to be understood. At the end of the Walker War, Utah leaders Chief Wakarapanakare Quirker, Chief Signeroch Arapin, and Chief Nuyuwat Noat Migo said they were ready to lay down their arms. Chief Wakarapanakare Quirker negotiated for food, guns, and ammunition. Even though the conflict was over, that did not solve the underlying issues. The Deseret News, February 8, 1855. Death of Indian Walker President Brigham Young. Dear brother, I improve this the earliest opportunity to inform you of the death of Captain Walker, the Utah chief, after a sickness of 10 days. He died on the 28th instant at Meadows Creek, about 6 miles from Fillmore. His complaint seemed to be a cold settled on his lungs. I arrived at Fillmore on the 28th instant and started next morning for Walker's Lodge and met the Utahs coming with Walker and supporting him on a horse. He held out his hand and shook hands and seemed very glad to see me. He asked me if Brigham talked good and if I was going with him to the Navajos. I told him that Brother Brigham talked very good and perhaps I would go with him. I showed him the letter you sent to him, and I gave him all the articles you sent to him. He seemed greatly pleased with them and wanted me to come next morning to Meadow Creek and read the letter for him. On the next morning before day, the Pavans came running into the fort and said that Walker was dead and the Utahs were mad, that they had killed 2 squaws and 2 Pida children. Kanosh, the Pavant chief, sent us word to drive up all our horses and cattle and keep out of the canyons, that the Utahs intended to kill 2 Pavants and 2 Mormons, and a great many cattle. About 18 of our people went out in the morning and found that the Utahs had killed 2 squaws, Pide prisoners, and 2 Pide children, and about 12 or 15 of Walker's best horses. They had buried Walker with the letter and all the articles you sent to him. Yours as ever in the gospel of Christ. David Lewis, P.S. Walker's last words to his people were not to kill the Mormons' cattle nor steal from them. I was with him until he was struck with death. He was in his senses and greatly desired to live. He possessed a good spirit and shook hands twice with me. As I was starting for the fort, he pressed my hand and said, "Come and see me again tomorrow, for I wish to have a long talk with you, but am too sick to talk now." Chief Signeroch Arapin was born in Spanish Fork and passed at Fish Lake, Sanpete, Utah. He was the son of Chief Old Uinta Munch and Tisham I, and became the head chief of the Utahs after Chief Wakara died. He was a powerful leader and an effective storyteller with a reputation for being daring, cruel, and excitable. Chief Signeroch Arapin was the first of the chiefs to wage war against the Latter-day Saints because the grieving warrior believed the whites had used evil spirits to murder his father, Chief Old Uinta Munch. His father died of smallpox caused by settlers who brought the disease with them to Utah. A story that is told, when he got mad at his wife, he burned her with a cast-iron pan handle. She went to the nearest settlement, and the white women took care of her injury until she recovered. The Deseret News, February 8, 1860. Letter from Sanpete County. By letter from Monty, dated January 22nd, we are informed that the disease which had prevailed among cattle there during the winter had not abated, and they were dying off as fast as ever. Arapin, the Utah chief, is reported as being ill and not expected to recover. The Aborigines in this part of the territory seemed to be wasting away very fast, and the band, which, under Walker, their former chief, was the terror of the surrounding tribes and of the lower California and New Mexico, has dwindled down to a mere handful of warriors. The Mountaineer, Salt Lake City, Utah, December 15th, 1860. Death of the great chief. On the 4th instant, Arapian, the chief of all the Utes, departed this life. He had been on a visit to the Navajos, and during his whole journey he was afflicted with consumption. Being apprehensive of his approaching dissolution, he gave instructions that no white man should be killed at his death, as had been the custom. Pursuant to his instruction, his brother San Pitch, who now takes the command of the tribe, had 4 horses killed, and, it is said, 5 head of cattle to accompany Arapian to his anticipated hunting grounds. He died 60 miles south of Manti. In the days of the great Chief Walker, Arapian was said to be the greatest brave of all the Utes. Chief Ammon was born in Spanish Fork, Utah, and passed in Bingham Canyon, Salt Lake City, Utah. He was the son of Chief Old Uinta Munch and Wadza Piedza, half-brother to Chiefs Wakara, Arapian, Sandpitch, and Tabby Tequana. He became the head chief after Chief Arapian died. He was influential and had been the personal emissary of Chief Wakara. He was known to be intelligent, friendly, and cheerful, always appreciating a good story. He could be a jokester, and on one occasion had some settlers dance for the amusement of Chief Wakara. The Deseret News, June 19, 1861, death of Ammon. The well-known Utah Indian Ammon, half-brother to the late celebrated Chief Walker, died in his camp at the mouth of Bingham's Canyon on the 12th instant, as reported by Mr. Huntington, Indian interpreter. He had been sick a long time, of disease contracted by coming in contact with Christian civilization, as practiced by a federal prosecuting attorney at Nephi, while a district court was in session there some years since, but whether the disease was engineered at that time or since the army came to Utah, our informant saith not. His death is said to have been extremely agonizing, and one of his horses was killed before the vital spark had fled, and 4 afterwards, in accordance with the religious rites and ceremonies of the Indians on such occasions. Chief Sandpitch was born in Spanish Fork, Utah, and passed in Birch Canyon near Fountain Green, Sanpete, Utah. He was the son of Chief Old Uinta Munch and Tisham Ige, always pretty. He was known to have considerable influence with the other sub-chiefs during the Black Hawk War. In the spring of 1866, as a ploy to get Black Hawk to bargain, the Mormon leader, Brigham Young, had Chief Sandpitch incarcerated along with other tribal chiefs in the Manti jail. A few chiefs were able to escape, including Sandpitch, who was shot and wounded. He was later found by a local posse near Fountain Green, where he sat alone, defenseless atop a boulder in Birch Creek Canyon. It is said that he pleaded for his life, but was killed regardless. From oral history, Chief Sandpitch was under pressure to move his people to the Uinta Valley Reservation. Sandpitch stated, "This is my land. I shall stay here on this land till I get ready to go away, and then I shall go to the Snakes or somewhere else." Chief Sandpitch did not go to the reservation and died on his lands. Sub-Chief Tintic was born in Sanpete, Utah, and passed in Cedar Valley. He was a sub-chief of the Cedar Valley Utahs. The Tintic War was of short duration and was due to conflict with the Latter-day Saints and the stealing of their livestock. By the fall of 1856, Chief Tintic was poor and alone, but still threatening. He had gone to the Uinta Valley to live with another family clan, but later returned to the Cedar Valley. Tintic died on March 15, 1859, near Manti, Utah. Chief Arapeen, Chief Petitnete, and Chief Sandpitch, along with their bands, gathered for his last journey. The Deseret News, April 6, 1859. Tintic, the notorious Ute chief, died on the morning of the 15th instant. The Indians had a big powwow on the occasion and killed 8 horses to accompany him to the world of spirits. The citizens of this territory, who have been acquainted with his history, will not much deplore his death. Arapeen, Petitnete, and Sandpitch, with a large number of Indians, are encamped 4 miles south of this place. They are a heavy tax upon the people, as they are destitute of food and have to be fed by the citizens. They are waiting for the superintendent, Dr. Forney, to visit them, but hope that his coming will not be prolonged, and that he will do something to relieve their necessities. The United States troops that have been quartered at Ephraim have been ordered to other points. It is a general time of health, peace, and prosperity in this and the other settlements in this county. Chief Tabby Tequana was born in Spanish Fork, Utah, and passed at the White Rocks Indian Village on the Uinta Valley Reservation, Utah. He was sub-chief of the Yampa and Taos Utahs in western Colorado, under Chief Antero, and later became a head chief over all the Utahs, leading many bands from the Utah Valley to the Uinta Valley Reservation during the late 1860s. He made several trips to Washington, D.C. to negotiate for his people. He was known to want peace and preserve his people's way of life. He hoped that moving to the reservation would provide that, but the teachings passed down from him were disappointment. He never understood why the government never fulfilled their promises. Another story told is that Chief Tabby Tequana's son, Tom Tabby, died in a hunting accident in 1867 near Heber City, Utah. The chief carried his dead son in his arms to the town, hoping that the boy could be buried there. According to a plaque at the cemetery, Joseph Stacy Murdoch consented to conduct a Christian burial service. Following the funeral, Chief Tabby Tequana said, "My son has been buried in the white man's custom. Now he will be honored in the Indian fashion." The Indians laid cedar logs on the grave, led the boy's favorite pony to the logs, and killed it, then set the grave on fire. When the blaze had died to embers, the saddened chief mounted his horse, and with his companions rode east to the reservation. For many years, Tabby continued as an effective leader, serving his people, working for their rights, and maintaining peace. Chief Tabby Tequana passed on November 22, 1902. Report from H.P. Meighton, 1903. 50 ponies killed over grave of Chief Tabby. Major H.P. Meighton, Indian agent at Fort Duchesne, brings from the reservation confirmation of the news of the death of Tabby, the famous old Uinta chief, which occurred there some days ago. Tabby was more than 100 years of age and had been blind for the past 10 years. In the old chief's possession were letters from Brigham Young and various government officials of high standing thanking him for keeping his braves off the warpath at various times in the old days when the bucks had their dander up and were thirsting for the white man's gore. Chief Tabby's funeral was one of the most elaborate ever held on the reservation, and had he been alive, he would have doubtless felt that he was having the time of his life. Hundreds of dollars worth of expensive blankets were placed in his grave, and 50 ponies were killed over the spot where he was laid to rest. Chief Tabby was one of the few good Indians and always had a high regard for the whites, with a natural antipathy to war and bloodshed, and it was these characteristics that made him famous. The white people, who knew and respected the old chief, will all join in the hope that the happy hunting grounds will fulfill his most sanguine expectations. Chief Nuyawat Noatmigo was born in Spanish Fork, Utah, and passed at Rock Creek, Utah, on the Uinta Valley Reservation. He was the chief of the Spanish Fork, Utahs, and was instrumental, along with Chief Ammon and Chief Walker, to negotiate with the settlers for peace ending the Walker War. His daughter, Rachel Wanzitz, was kidnapped by Latter-day Saints at Fort Ephraim when she was about 10 years old and made a house servant. When she would leave the house to get water, her mother Tupin's Lucilla Copperfield would meet her by the river to visit. Rachel never forgot her family or culture and passed on her stories to her daughters. Chief No Winch Charles Wanrhodes was born in the Wasatch Valley and passed at Hill Creek, Duchesne, Utah. He was a sub-chief of the Pacaquanarats Utahs under his father, Chief Opie Carey Featherstick, in the head Wanrhodes. After his father's death, he became chief of the Pacaquanarats Utahs and made several trips to Washington, D.C. to negotiate for his people. Throughout the 1870s, he continued to bring the family clans to the reservation. John Wesley Powell visited the Uinta Valley Reservation in 1873, where Chief No Winch Charles Wanrhodes assisted him in writing down the Uinta-at language. He was known to be an intelligent man, spoke well, and was able to be diplomatic when dealing with the government. He passed on February 17, 1922, at Hill Creek, Utah. The Salt Lake Herald, September 13, 1901, Indians of Utah are to combine. Richfield, September 12th, Wanrhodes, chief of the Uinta White Rock Indians, arrived in Richfield this week on his way to visit Chief Walker of the Grass Valley Indians. Wanrhodes said the object of his mission was to try and get Walker's consent to have his tribe join the Uintas. There seems to be a general move among the Indians throughout the state supposed to have this object, a consolidation of all tribes. The Uinta chief is a quiet, dignified old Indian, well preserved. He speaks good English and related that he frequently visited this section when a young man, but not since the first town was started in the valley at Gunnison. He was acquainted with some of the pioneers and visited their families. He secured quarters at the hotel and registered as the white people do. He says he took part in the Black Hawk War, but will not name any particular engagements. Chief Tavagunt, Andrew Frank, was born in the Uinta Mountains, Utah, and passed in Salt Lake City, Utah. He was head chief over all the Uinta band of Utahs, and was known as a strong leader, fair, and loved his horses. Chief Tavagunt, Andrew Frank, was a storyteller, and many of his stories are passed down today. During the 1940s and up to his passing, he kept the Uinta band of Utahs together, voiced his decision that we would not be participating in the Confederated Ute of Colorado judgment funds, and tried to do the right thing for his people. He passed on December 10th, 1951, not knowing that all he did to protect the people was in vain. Once Chief Tavagunt Andrew Frank passed, Jim Atwine became chief of the Uinta Band of Utahs. Long ago, he had married a Confederated Ute of Colorado, and all of his children and their descendants became members of the Confederated Utes. Once the Uinta Band of Utahs were separated from the Uinta Agency rolls in 1954, he chose to stay with his family so he could continue to receive a portion of the Ute Treaty stipulations and their 1950s judgment funds. To this day, Jim Atwine is not spoken of. He turned his back on the Uinta Band of Utahs. Our people say Chief Tavagunt Andrew Frank was the last Uinta Band of Utahs chief. The Utahs, Uinta Band of Utahs, the Uinta Valley Shoshone Tribe of Utah Indians, and the affiliated Ute citizens of the state of Utah are all the same people, with a familial bloodline of ancestors born and raised in the Utah Territory. Their descendants continue to reside on their executive order reservation in the Uinta Basin in northeastern Utah.